I'm a full believer, and I think long term, I'm just as bullish as Michael Saylor. I think the price of Bitcoin will go to 50 million plus.
You think per coin, it's going to $50 million?
Yes, absolutely.
In our lifetime?
Yes, of course.
Wow. Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. Joining me this week is Eric Jackson. He is the founder of EMJ Capital, which is a hedge fund that looks for 100 baggers. What does that mean? Stocks that can go 100x. And Eric has a pretty good track record of picking some great companies. So this is a little bit out of my normal Bitcoin avenue because you haven't really talked about Bitcoin publicly. But Eric, it's great to have you. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Well, let's get a little bit of your backstory. Tell us about your investing background, how you got to start your hedge fund, and how you've become so successful in picking winning companies that you've been able to turn around.
Well, I have a long and windy career that brought me to this point, but it really goes back to my grandparents who came from Western Ukraine. And so I'm really close to all my family on both sides, but my dad's family's, English, Scots, Irish, but my two grandparents on my mom's side are from Western Ukraine. And my grandfather, who's now passed, came over to North America when he was 16 years old. And because basically they had nothing in Western Ukraine. They were from this little village called Chernovitsi. And basically his parents said, if you want to be successful in life, you need to go to America. And basically, we'll never see you again. And so I have 4 kids, including a 16-year-old, and I can't imagine kind of just sort of saying goodbye to my 16-year-old son. But he went up to Hamburg, he got on a steamer ship, got dropped off in Ellis Island. I found actual forms that he signed in Ellis Island, checking in at 16 years old. And he didn't know anybody over here, but his parents had some distant relatives who lived in northwestern Manitoba in Canada. And so he went to a place called Swan River, Manitoba. It probably took him 2 weeks to get from Ellis Island to Swan River, and basically had to kind of look for work and make money. And so he literally rode the rails across Canada during the Great Depression, from town to town looking for work. He had no education, no skill set, did whatever he could, eventually became a welder, helped build the Alaska Highway during the World War II that basically get supplies up to, because they were worried the Russians were going to invade through Alaska. Anyway, my grandmother ran a rooming house in Toronto after the World War II because they couldn't afford a place to live, and they got free housing in this boarding house and made some extra money taking care, collecting sort of checks from these retired military people that were living in this boarding house. Anyway, he eventually, he came back home. They saved up enough money. They bought their house in the 1950s in Toronto, which was their first house, and it became kind of like the proudest. It was bigger than Drake's mansion to my grandfather. He's loved this place. It was the center of the whole family. Oh. It's a Ukrainian family, so big family. We have all kinds of celebrations there growing up as a kid. It was sort of the center of my world growing up.
Wow.
And it was within their grasp. When they were sort of this young couple starting out coming from nothing with no background, and to live in kind of the biggest city in Canada at the same time. And so, the world has changed a lot. But so he was a big influence on me. And I remember he came and kind of sat me down once when I was visiting him when I was 11 years old. And he gave me an Omega watch, which I didn't know what an Omega watch was. It looked gold. It looked expensive, and he said, Eric, I want to give this to you. And I want to tell you something. You have to remember in life, you always have to buy quality. Don't buy the cheap stuff. Cheap clothing, cheap suit, it's going to fall apart. Spend a little bit extra and buy, something that lasts. And that always stuck with me. And, I don't think he invested $1 in his life. He kept his money in the bank. He paid for the family expenses. He was a simple man. But, he would have loved Bitcoin, because he was always telling me, the government's never going to save you. You have to get up every day, work hard. You're going to have to save yourself. You're going to have to push yourself ahead. And just a couple of months ago, I was down at the bottom of Manhattan at this party for American Bitcoin, because they just had this sort of listing. They had listed as a stock, and so they were at Casa Cipriani, a very swanky place in New York. And you can, if you go out on the balcony, you can look around, you can see Ellis Island. And I was like, man, if my grandfather was here today and he could sort of see, he didn't have any opportunities like I've had, and yet, the hard work, 100 years later, basically his offspring are kind of able to accomplish all these great things in finance and business and with retail investors. He is had such a monumental impact on me and my career, and which isn't over, but that's the kind of, what sort of drives me. And I know we'll talk about Opendoor, but just the way that the house was so important for him and his family. It's a major issue in our society right now.
Coin Stories is proudly brought to you by Gemini. Start your Bitcoin savings account today. Plus, investing in Bitcoin has never been easier than with Gemini's Orange Bitcoin credit card. Earn up to 4% back in Bitcoin on everyday purchases like gas, dining, groceries, and more, with no annual fee, no foreign transaction fees, and no exchange fees on your rewards. Plus, sign up today and get a $200 Bitcoin bonus when you spend $3,000 in your first 90 days. Apply now at gemini.com/Natalie. If you want to stay on top of Bitcoin without getting lost in all the noise, check out the weekly CIO memo from Bitwise Asset Management. CIO Matt Hogan puts together a quick 5-minute memo that breaks the biggest stories in digital assets each week. Bitwise has been around since 2017 and manages more than $10 billion across 30 plus strategies. The weekly CIO memo is bold, sharp, and totally free. Just go to bitwiseinvestments.com/CIO memo. And always, of course, carefully consider the extreme risks associated with crypto. Coin Stories is also brought to you by Ledn. Need cash but don't want to sell your Bitcoin? Ledn is the global leader in Bitcoin-backed loans, issuing over $9 billion in loans since 2018. And they were the first to offer proof of reserves. With Ledn, you get custody loans, no monthly payments, and more. Visit ledn.io/Natalie and get a 0.25 percentage point off your first loan. Make sure to get your copy of my new Bitcoin 101 book, Bitcoin is for Everyone. The book explains why money is broken and how Bitcoin can help you build lasting wealth and freedom. It makes the perfect gift for those new to Bitcoin. Just visit the link in my show notes. Well, so how did you build this successful investing company? I mean, you've really been able to set yourself apart and notice things in the market that are huge opportunities that go on to, like you mentioned, 100x in the best scenarios. But even recently, you saw that there was an opportunity with Opendoor, and you started, now it's called the Opendoor Army, right? They're probably going to be tweeting in the thread in this post. But how did you become such a good investor?
Well, there are people out there that are short sellers, and all they do every day when they wake up is kind of look at everything that can go wrong. My just natural philosophy in life is to kind of, to almost take the opposite view of what are all the things that could go right? What's the blue sky scenario in any situation with any stock? That's what gets me most excited. I don't really get excited thinking about this stock or this coin could go up 10% or 20% or something like that. I'm more excited about, hey, there's an unraveling story that's going on here, and it might not happen next year or 2 years, but 3 years. If this trajectory kind of keeps going, this thing could really be huge multiples of where it is today, and hopefully 10x, 20x, and then 100x. And I have found a few like that over the years of being a hedge fund manager. Lots of ups and downs, lots of mistakes. But one of the big hits that I had a couple of years ago was I found this company Carvana that right. Was sort of left for dead. It had been a high flyer, a big growth success story of the last decade. Everybody's seen their bubblegum car machines on the side of the highway when they drive around, and they knew that it was a good customer experience. It was helping you bypass going to the used car dealer on the corner to sell your used car and have a more direct relationship. But they'd raised a lot of debt, and they sort of got in trouble when interest rates rose so suddenly. So their stock went from $400 to $3.50 in December of 2022, which was sort of the peak pessimist kind of period after the rate hikes. And that crypto was down then and everything. Yeah. And nobody thought they would come back from the dead. It was sort of like if you talked with analysts or investors or finance Twitter people, they were like, oh yeah, like these guys, you would have to be a bunch of idiots to let your stock go from $400 to $3.50. And yet I sort of saw an opportunity that they had to come back. And I was working away in the first iterations of the AI models that we are using to this day to try to help identify, opportunities, 100x opportunities. And one of the first model came back and said, hey, Carvana, something's going on here. This should be the number 2 long position in your portfolio. And
your AI model spit that out?
Yes.
Wow.
And this was when it was like $11 a share. And I knew the company because I had traded it, in the prior years. And, one of the things that had caught my eye, in 2022 when the stock was going down was that several people on the management team had bought a lot of stock. The CEO is a guy named Ernie Garcia Jr. He'd bought $70 million worth of his own stock that year, which is a lot. And some people criticize him because, he's wealthy and his dad was wealthy. But $70 million is a lot of money. I don't care how wealthy you are to put into your own stock. And, nobody does that thinking they're going to set it on fire.
Right.
But there was another guy who was on the management team who was the chief product officer, a guy named Dan Gill. And he happened to follow me on Twitter. And I noticed that in Thanksgiving of 2022, Dan had bought $3.5 million worth of his own stock. And that's something you normally never see. Like a lower, not a lower level person, but, it's usually just the CEO symbolically buying a little bit of stock. But Dan had bought a lot of stock. And, I know just from my own marriage, like if I went home to my wife and my stock was down 98%, and probably she's worried that, is this thing going to go bankrupt and what's going to happen? And I say, you know what, honey, we got to double down here or triple down and let's take another $3.5 million out of our savings and put it into this stock that has just dropped 98%. I probably could have convinced her, but I think it might have been touch and go there in the conversation for a while. So that he had that conversation, really impressed me. So I reached out and had a phone conversation with him, and I was just blown away. He was very humble. He's a Canadian guy, and he said, we all know each other on the management team. We went to Stanford together, most of us, and we have problems. We have challenges as a company, but we really think we've got something here, and we're going to be special. And that's why I put the money in. So just knowing that backstory, I just, when the AI model flagged it, it was like, okay, I think this could work out. And it did end up coming all the way back and recently got over $400 a share again. So it went from $400 to $3.50 to $400. So it more than 100x. And so, because I had that feather in my cap, I guess, I went on with my life. I was looking at other stocks, but I decided earlier this year, that was obviously a big hit, and it's difficult to find these 100 baggers in stocks. It's especially because most of these private companies stay private a lot longer than they used to. But I said, let's focus on that. And so we found a couple of companies early that were, I was really excited about, IREN and Cipher, and that are Bitcoin miners that are transitioning to AI, data center type companies. And I would talk about, hey, this is the next Carvana. And one of the things that I noticed immediately was that people were, immediately, salivating to hear about the next Carvana. And I would get these tweets from people like, I missed Carvana 2 years ago.
Yeah,
I'm not going to miss it this time. And then questions would come up like, hey, Eric, didn't you once like Opendoor? You're like, whatever happened to Opendoor? I remember once you were on a podcast and you said, you thought Opendoor could be a Carvana-like company. And the truth was I hadn't looked at them in a long time because they had kept going down when Carvana had made this turn to go up again. And when I did in the summer get in, start looking at them again, it didn't take a rocket scientist to realize that interest rates were going to have to fall because the economy was slowing. And that would obviously help a company like Opendoor that's exposed to the housing market and mortgage rates and all that. And they were going to have their first profitable quarter in 3 years, which is sort of like a necessary precondition for any of these companies to start moving up again. People have to believe that they're about to hit profitability again, and hopefully there's growth ahead for the company. And so it all lined up, and I decided, hey, I'm going to go public. And this time I'm going to make the Opendoor a bigger part of my portfolio, and I'm going to talk about it in advance. Whereas I was a little sheepish before to say, hey, I love Carvana, because everybody was out there saying, this is The Walking Dead, and why would you touch this company? And I just figured, what do I care? I mean, I've gone through my own kind of ups and downs in my career. I don't care if people laugh at me or make fun of me. I'm just sort of going to call my shot, like the Babe Ruth pointing at the bleachers, about to hit the home run, hopefully. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I'm going to stake my claim on this. And immediately, like, people were excited about it. And I came out with like my analysis in a tweet storm where I said, this 80-cent stock, I think in a few years could be worth $82. So it's a potential 100 bagger. And people were like, 100, $82. What? Like, it was such a crazy number to, people just couldn't wrap their brains around it. This was like a $400 million market cap company. And I was calling it the Amazon. It was going to be the Amazon of real estate, and that it didn't compute for people. And it was an interesting, it showed me the importance of narrative in these kinds of stories. Like, we can all be the best analysts that we want to be. We can all do our, run our spreadsheets about what Bitcoin is worth now and what it should be.
Yeah.
But it's more of like, how do you actually communicate that in a way that galvanizes people? That,
right.
At the end of the day, prices of Bitcoin or prices of stocks are constructed socially. And so we have to, there has to be a reason for people to believe. And so that comes through story, which...
Well, and I've even seen Bitcoiners this year, because Bitcoin sort of underperformed what we would like to see, even though we are up a lot, actually, if you look at a year ago. Mm-hmm. But this year in 2025, it's been very, very choppy, and people have been looking for other opportunities. And the idea of, being able to 100x their money, that's something that maybe a small percentage of their portfolio they want to allocate to those opportunities. Specifically with Opendoor, I did want to learn more, because there is such a housing affordability crisis. It's in the headlines everywhere. The administration is trying to get creative with the 50-year mortgage, portable mortgage. But can you explain what the company actually does, and what are your ideas maybe for allowing for more people to be able to have access to home ownership?
Well, they were founded 10 years ago, and their idea was, just like Carvana disrupted going to the used car lot on the corner to buy and sell your car. They said, why do we need real estate agents? Why this is. We pay 6% of the commission rates to these folks. What do they actually do for that? Just because we've always done something one way, just because we've always done mortgage and title this way and home inspections this way, and has this long closing period attached to the home purchases, like, why do we have to do it that way? And so the original business plan was to try to streamline the whole process, so that you would just go to an app or go to a website for Opendoor, type in your address of the home that you were selling, and they would immediately make you an offer. And if you agreed and clicked yes, submit, within a few days or when they started, it was probably 3 weeks, you would have money wired into your account. No tours through your house, no like leaving your house. It was just like basically selling direct to this company, Opendoor. And what they found is that there was a huge interest in that kind of model. Not for everybody and not for all houses, but there was a certain section of the market that agreed, really loved that idea. And so that was how the company got built. And they got really good at making offer price. Obviously you have to price it properly, and that's a key part. But they never really moved past something called iBuying, which is just the actual buying and selling. And obviously it's a big ticket purchase for Opendoor to have to buy your house from you. Their average prices of the houses that they buy are $400,000. So you have to have a big balance sheet to execute this business plan, and you can't be wrong, especially when the interest rates turn. And so that's what led to the problems in 2021 when interest rates did jack up so quickly. But they also never got to the part of bundling in mortgages and as part of the service and other ancillary revenues that you can attach to the actual buying and selling of the house. And that's what's interesting about Carvana. Carvana doesn't make much money from buying and selling cars. They make 80% of their profits from the finance and interest attached to the buying and selling of the cars. So for Opendoor, it's the same kind of an approach. Like there's a reason why like 2 of the NBA teams are owned by people that run mortgage companies. Like there's a lot of money in putting mortgages together. So right now, Opendoor is now in the process of sort of version 2 of themselves with a new management team and a new CEO who's the former COO of Shopify. And they're really trying to fulfill this original vision of they want to do 3-day closes where, basically when you click submit, your money is in your account 3 days from now. And before you even exit that session of where you've sold your house, they've already immediately kind of made an offer. Hey, would you like a credit line to now browse these other houses that you could potentially buy at the same time that you've just sold your house a second ago? So we're sort of, they're trying to, obviously we all have gotten used to living in our phones. Yeah. We don't want to talk to people. We don't want a big elongated sales process. If we can do things faster and faster at a fair price with kind of speed and assurances around the price that we're going to get for our homes, that's a compelling value proposition. So, and it lowers the costs for people, the uncertainty, that people have to move in different parts to the different parts of the country. So they're helping lower the cost of home ownership just through a much simpler and cheaper process. There are some other political levers, though, that can be pulled that will help Opendoor. So things like assumable mortgages and portable mortgages. One is like if you got a low interest rate now, if you were lucky enough to lock into like a 2% 30-year fixed mortgage a couple of years ago, what if you could take that with you when you moved from New Jersey to California? Right. So like there are some things that the government can do, and I think will do, to kind of help basically break the logjam that's currently, it's such a different world from when my grandparents were buying that first house in the 50s. And if you don't have a good house, that's sort of like the central part of the family. And if America gets slowed down as a country if it doesn't have, that sort of rock solid family base, which is based on, people being able to afford homes. So this is critically important for the country.
Well, that's something I've seen you talk about, that real estate sort of anchors communities and is really important when it comes to a sense of ownership stake and building an investment within a community and neighborhood and giving young people an opportunity. So it seems like Opendoor is trying to democratize it in a way, but what are all these real estate agents going to do? You're going to displace all of them. Where are they going to go?
The funny thing is that, the open army, like there are probably the profession that is most represented in the open army internationally are real estate agents. And I had a dinner in Costa Mesa, California a few weeks ago with this guy who's like he runs a recycling yard out there in California, but his wife's a real estate agent. And so he was saying, we're all in on Opendoor. I said, really? Like, isn't that a threat to you? And he's like, no, it's a hedge, because if something happens to Andrea, like we know we're going to more than make up for it from the value that Opendoor shares are going to go up.
So Opendoor doesn't see the house but buys it, right? Nobody goes to see the house and you purchase it.
They're using AI basically to kind of better understand your neighborhood, that house, the individual deficiencies with that house that might kind of, the fact that there might be a barking dog next door that drives other neighbors in the neighborhood nuts. There's the AI is like involved in the home inspections. It's involved in the staging of houses these days. Now it's getting to be almost a problem where people get disappointed when they actually go into the house and they expect something from the AI stage version of the house that they saw online to what it actually is. But it's Opendoor was a company that had 1,400 people this summer when it was sort of like asleep at the wheel before the new team came in. They're hoping to take it down something like 80-90% of the headcount down and replace all those jobs. And they had something like 11 people that had to be involved in selling one house every time they did it.
Oh, wow.
Now they're down to one. Just in the last month, these are the changes the new CEO has made, and the rest is being filled in by AI. So anytime people say, I don't see how AI is like changing the world, like I hear about all these companies spending money, investing in AI, but where's the payoff? Well, it's coming through these kinds of case studies of Opendoor and what they're planning on doing and revolutionizing the real estate business.
So if you're buying a house, you can see it though. I'd imagine you'd want a tour, right? To be able to buy. Is this competing with Zillow in a way? Because Zillow, you can't do this on. You can't like make an offer on the house. I guess you can. They connect you to a real estate agent. I don't know. Yeah,
Zillow started as basically a nice place to kind of browse houses.
Yes, yeah.
But whenever you got excited about a house, they would pass you off to an agent.
Oh, yeah.
And so they made money from selling ads next to these houses or getting from, real estate agent leads for the and Opendoor. The interesting thing about them is they had 1.5 million Americans come to them last year to specifically ask for a quote to buy their house.
Wow.
Okay. So that it's a seller demand as opposed to looky-loos, and people interested in potentially buying. And that seller demand is highly monetizable. Like that's I think what people missed about Opendoor when it was just a $400 million stock, is that it's sort of like the difference between the power of people going to Google and typing in their intent into the search bar. Google realized, we can actually start selling ads next to this. There's a whole revenue stream that can flow from this. So that's a Rocket Mortgage doesn't have those 1.5 million Americans coming to them looking for a solution to kind of selling their house. So they are in a unique position, and it's still a lot of work, but it has major upside. And there were a lot of people that were Bitcoin investors, crypto investors, who I noticed like they were saying, we're bored of Bitcoin, or we're bored of the Mag 7, and we're looking for kind of more interesting stories. And we believe like this real estate, is a major problem for America. And this could be, a great stock to own, but also be part of kind of something that reshapes how the country looks in a few years from now. So.
That's so interesting. Well, you can't live in your Bitcoin. I mean, for me, I have a dream house. Every time I go on those apps like Zillow, the prices just depress me because it's like I don't have enough Bitcoin. But do you have like a Bitcoin story? How did you get into it? Are you a holder? Do you share how much you hold in terms of your net worth?
Well, I'm definitely a Bitcoin bull and a holder, and believe in Bitcoin long term, to the point where next month, I'm launching a spin out from my hedge fund for EMJ Capital, which is going to be a digital treasury company, a DAT, that's going to primarily hold Bitcoin, but it's unlike some of the other DATs out there. It's going to be a multi-asset treasury company. So it's going to have Bitcoin, Ethereum, and some other coins, which I call Carvana coins, because those would be smaller altcoins that most people don't pay attention to once they get. Once they have their Bitcoin core holdings, because obviously that's the granddaddy of everything in crypto and what everyone cares about. And I'm a full believer, and I think long term, I'm just as bullish as Michael Saylor. I think the price of Bitcoin will go to 50 million plus.
You think the Bitcoin price, like per coin?
Yeah.
You think per coin it's going to $50 million?
Yes, absolutely.
In our lifetime?
Yes, of course.
Wow.
Because this is not. It will easily be as valuable as the current gold holdings that we see today, that are held by central banks and sovereigns, as well as retail investors around the world. And but then I don't think it stops there. I mean, it's so much more sort of a perfect version of digital gold, and I think it has the opportunity to be a much more widely held form of currency. And so it's when you look at it that way that I can easily kind of imagine those kinds of like eye-popping, per Bitcoin numbers. But I was talking to Brandon Lutnick a few weeks ago from Cantor Fitzgerald, and he was saying, a lot of people, they never look past Bitcoin. It's sort of taken us all this time in the last 10 years just to tell the Bitcoin story, and to explain Ethereum and to explain some of these other coins, people sort of wave their hands and say, oh, it's too complex, or there's a lot of scams out there. And there's no question that there are scams out there in a lot of these crypto coins, but it would kind of be the equivalent of a stock investor saying, I only invest in the Mag 7 stocks. I'm just never going to look at the Russell 2000 or something, which is fine. I mean, you can make a lot of money investing in Apple or Tesla or Nvidia, but you're never going to find a Carvana that way. And so I think there's an opportunity for a digital asset treasury that's focused on Bitcoin and Ethereum as sort of the two big players, with Bitcoin as sort of being the sun that everything else circles around. But there'll be some smaller kind of off the beaten path, 100 bagger opportunities in other coins as well. So it's going to be a multi-asset strategy, and it's going to use the AI models that we've built over the last 4 years to help us hedge the value of our treasury over time. So I love Bitcoin. I have like the highest regard for like Michael Saylor with MicroStrategy. But, I think we would all recognize like MicroStrategy is kind of like, sort of like Bitcoin rocket fuel. And so if Bitcoin is going to go up 60% in a year, MicroStrategy is probably going to go up 75% in that year. But when Bitcoin pulls back, like we've seen just in the last couple of months, MicroStrategy is a more levered play on that. And so I think the opportunity for a digital asset company, which is what EMJX is going to be about, is to provide better hedging for those down periods. And so we're using the AI models that we've built on our team over these last 4 years to do that. And what's been surprising to me is that when we've downloaded, all the transactions for Bitcoin in the past 4 years, there's so much more information saved on the blockchain that you can leverage when you're building these kinds of AI models compared to a stock model. So things like, obviously wallet level information, who's buying what, which whales are buying, which whales are selling, which wallets have made correct trades in the past that are worth watching, whether they're whales or not. Then there's all kinds of, stable coin information. Is money flowing into Bitcoin? Is it coming out of Bitcoin? That when we actually build the models, a good stock model is probably right 52% of the time in terms of making money-making predictions for different trades. The good Bitcoin models that we've built over these last few years, they have about an 83% hit rate. So much higher. And so
why is that?
I think it's because of all this additional information that's saved on the blockchain, so that we're able to kind of leverage as we build the models. So the opportunity is like, why do you want to just be a buoy on the water, rising and falling with the price of Bitcoin? Like, when we all agree that there will be periods of volatility and drawdowns. And so I think what we hope anyway is like this will be a sort of a generation 2 version of a DAT treasury. Just like Google was generation 2 coming after Lycos and Excite search engines that came around the first time. And what people will be attracted to is that we're going to ride through those periods of volatility better and still make money when times go up. So we haven't launched yet. I can only like refer to like the back tested, numbers. But in this year, for example, in 2025, the kinds of returns that we're seeing in terms of the value of our treasury that we've been testing and kind of watching every day before launching, we're up something like 50%, with our models. Whereas I think Bitcoin, today was like basically flat on the year, maybe up 1% on the year. And a MicroStrategy is negative on the year because it's a more kind of levered play to it. So that's, I think, what people will be excited about. So I'm all in on Bitcoin. It's definitely, my grandfather would be proud to be kind of disconnected from, the central banks of the world and kind of feel like more sense of autonomy and control from owning Bitcoin. And that's what we're going to be all about. But we hopefully will bring a story that's a little bit differentiated compared to some of the other treasuries out there this year.
Want to accept Bitcoin and stablecoin payments? Speed makes it simple. Customers can pay via QR code in app, online, or POS. Speed helped Steak and Shake accept Bitcoin nationwide. Here's what Dan Edwards, COO, says.
And when customers choose to pay in Bitcoin instead of credit cards, we are saving about 50% in our processing fees.
This led to more support from Bitcoin users and a 10% revenue boost. Getting started is easy. Sign up at tryspeed.com or integrate the API in hours. Start accepting Bitcoin today. Download Speed at speed.app/coinstories or the QR code on the screen and use code CoinStories10 for 5,000 free sats. Bitkey is a Bitcoin hardware wallet with multi-sig security, inheritance, and a recovery system designed for real life. No complex setup and no seed phrases. Just true self-custody without the stress. It was named one of Time's best inventions in 2024. Use code STORIES for 20% off at bitkey.world. Up next, the Bitcoin way. There's only one way to protect your Bitcoin from government, politicians, and third-party risk, and that is 100% self-custody. My friends at the Bitcoin way will train you how to do this the right way the first time. No compromises. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Natalie to speak with the experts about making sure your Bitcoin is secure and private. And finally, Coin Stories is brought to you by Genius Group, a Bitcoin treasury company listed on the NYSE American under ticker GNS. Genius is building a 10,000 Bitcoin treasury and just launched the Genius Academy, featuring free courses from Saifedean Ammous, myself, and more. Start learning today at geniusacademy.ai. Genius Group. Genius isn't measured in IQ, it's measured in Bitcoin. How important is the retail investor? Because I see folks like you and Mike Alfred, and you've built these communities online and people are following what you're doing on like a daily basis. Are you selling? Are you buying more? Which ticker should I look at? And I mean, it must feel great in a sense that people are entrusting you. They're looking to you as a benchmark for how they're going to invest. And I'm sure that also comes with some pressure because obviously now you may feel responsible for other people's kind of savings and where they're allocating their investments.
Well, it's definitely a lot of pressure for sure, and a little daunting sometimes when you hear people's personal stories and how much money that they might have invested in particular stocks that you've mentioned, or Bitcoin or something like that. But it's incredibly rewarding, and it's been super eye-opening for me, Natalie, this year, sort of on this journey with Opendoor especially, and since then. And the biggest surprise is that I sort of thought that, you hear the term retail investor, you think dumb money. I mean, that was the name of the movie about the whole GameStop episode from 2021 that described like the retail investors. And you sort of, if you watch business TV, you get the sense a lot of times Wall Street will say, oh, here's the latest meme stock. Yeah. Oh, retail is shooting themselves in the foot again. Yeah. They're just going to lose money. Yeah. They're like, why, I wish they would know better. I wish they were as smart as we are, and why don't they just give all their money to us and our low cost ETFs at Vanguard or whatever, and just mimics the, the NASDAQ or the S&P 500 or something like that, which is obviously more money in Wall Street's pockets and not in retail's. And, What I noticed this year is that when I would start to talk about some of these individual stocks, sometimes they'd be like super complex. Like I'm talking like post-quantum cryptography companies. I remember I was at home one day and some guy came in to paint the ceiling of our kitchen because one of my daughters flooded her, she let the bathtub run or something like that the night before. So there was, all this water damage in the ceiling. And he said, hey, aren't you Eric Jackson? I was like, yeah. And he's like, oh, aren't you into like, I heard you talking the other day, on Twitter or something about, quantum computing. And I was like, oh yeah. And he's like, oh yeah, I've been doing a lot of research on that. And we got into this like 30-minute conversation. And I said, man, you know a lot more about this sector than I do. Like, how do you do that? And he said, like, well, like I'm a painter. This is my job. I'm good at it. I'm happy. I've got this. I've got this sort of planned out for the rest of my life. But every night I go home and 3-4 hours I'll just spend in front of the computer researching stocks and researching crypto and Bitcoin, because I see this as like my second job. I have to and I know that if I just do the painting, it's not going to be enough, to provide for my family. And if I'm really going to provide generational wealth for them, I have to jump the line.
Right.
I have to move up my lot in life somehow. And investing is the only way that I can do that. And I was like, man, you're absolutely right. And as time would go on, like I would hear more and more of these stories.
Yeah.
People in the middle class, like really struggling to buy, especially for the younger generation, struggling to buy that first home. And it was international too. It wasn't just here in the US. Mm-hmm. Like I was over at a conference in Germany, in Frankfurt in September, and some guy over there who follows me, sent me a message in the morning. You're in my hometown. Can I buy you a coffee? I've made some money on Opendoor. I want to thank you. And I was like, well, sure. But then I got busy and I was on a panel or something. So I didn't check my phone. And then suddenly I was like walking in the hall and this guy like pops up and he's like, oh, I just showed up. I bought a ticket to the conference. I figured out what conference you were at. Yeah. And he started, I said, well, let's go have a coffee. And he was going through the same challenges of, struggling, to get ahead. He had a new baby. He wasn't making as much money as he wanted. He wasn't fully happy in his job, was investing on the side, but like, how does he get his name out there and all this kind of stuff. And I remember flying home and thinking to myself, this is global. This is a global issue, and there's got to be some solution. And people are looking for voices like Mike Alfred or me online, and they're sort of hungry for guidance, but they're also a little bit jaded at the Kardashianization of society today, where everybody who's tweeting is sort of leading you to a link to their merch store, or to spend money on my course or something. So I decided that I just wanted to use my platform just to try to educate folks. Yeah. And so I came up with this idea with the help of ChatGPT of Rising Dynasty, which is basically like we're all trying to build our own little dynasties in our families. And for some people, they'll buy a mansion, like 50,000 square foot mansion, I'm sure one day when they have their winnings. But other people have no interest in that. And they just want to have a comfortable life.
Yeah.
We all have our different ambitions, but we can learn from each other. We can support each other. I want to just do my part in that. And so that's, I think people just appreciate the help and the guidance. But they're much smarter than what they're given credit for. And I think one of the tenets of Rising Dynasty is something called slugging percentage over batting average. And so the idea is that if you find a Carvana, if you find an Opendoor, if you find a Bitcoin, like that you think is going to be a $50 million coin one day, for example, it's not enough just to put like 0.5% of whatever your investable income into that idea. You got to swing big. And so you can't be reckless. It can't be everything that you own or something, but you sort of realize that there are these moments in time, we all wish we could go back and buy Apple stock after the iPhone got introduced, right? Or we wish that we had read the original Bitcoin, white paper in 2009 and immediately gone out and figured out how to assemble our home computer system to start mining Bitcoin immediately, right? Well, but we can't. We're here now. Right. We got to make the best of what we have. Like we are so blessed. Like nobody before us could just like type into ChatGPT, get all the information that's available to humankind, immediately sort of downloaded to us. So we just have to make the most of that now and just keep the eyes open for the best opportunities that are out there going forward. And so I want people to kind of, have a core holding in Bitcoin. I want them to also be thinking about other 100-bagger types of ideas and put a meaningful amount of money behind them. There's this guy Masayoshi Son who started SoftBank, and so he's had so many big failures. Like WeWork is probably the biggest one that people remember from a few years ago. But what people don't realize is one of his biggest successes was he invested in this company Alibaba. in 2000, right after when the dot-com bubble was about to burst. He decided, like, he'd met the CEO, the founder CEO, this guy named Jack Ma, and just from like the way he describes it, there was something in this guy's eyes that sold him on Alibaba and made him know that this company was going to be super successful in China, trying to create sort of an internet behemoth over there in China. So he wrote a check immediately for $20 million, whereas at the time an American startup check might have been like 2 or 3 million, but a Chinese like internet startup would probably be like 200,000. So it was like a much bigger check than normal. That $20 million check, by the time that Alibaba IPO'd in 2014, so 14 years later, was worth $60 billion to SoftBank and to Masa. So he bet big and he won. And we're not all gonna, be able to kind of see those $60 billion paydays in 14 years from now. But the point is, like, when you find that big opportunity, whether it's Bitcoin or whatever, Opendoor, you have to make sure you're really putting some muscle behind it, rather than worrying about like, oh, I have like these 60 investments and I need to make sure I make like 5% on each one.
Yeah. Sometimes all you need is one really good big idea. I love so many of the points you made. I actually talk about in my new book, Bitcoin is for Everyone, the fact that we are all pushed into investing because our money doesn't hold value. So, some people put it, you have to earn your money twice. You have to put it to work. You have to acquire assets because our money is just being drained of purchasing power. And I like that you have a very positive outlook about it, because some people think, this is just the world is so broken and no one has a shot. No one has an opportunity today. And it's all going to get worse with AI and economic displacement, like employment displacement. But you make it sound like, no, anyone is capable of this. You have so much information at your fingertips. We all have AI that we can type into, and you can start learning about tools like Bitcoin to empower yourself. That seems to be the message that I'm getting from you, one of empowerment, and anyone can do this.
And realize, like, I've made so many stupid mistakes. I think sometimes people, like regular folks, like say, oh, like, what do I know about the stock market? I haven't, I'm too afraid to try. Like, you got to try. And part of trying is failing. Like, you don't learn unless you fail at something. And there have been so many times where, like, I was like, oh my God, like, I should be more successful, than what I am right now as a hedge fund guy. Am I really a hedge fund guy, or am I just like cosplaying like I'm a hedge fund guy? And like, should I just throw in the towel? And you just have to realize, like, part of, being successful is just realizing, like, you're put here for a reason by God. It wasn't just to kind of fail and go away and crawl into the corner and die. You're here to persevere and to fight through those like difficult moments, make the mistakes, lose money on some stock that you thought was going to do better than what it did, and just learn from it and move forward, press ahead, and just understand other people are in the same boat as you are, and they're not any smarter. I'm not any smarter than my grandfather who got off the boat at Ellis Island, who had never gone to school, basically. I just was given more opportunities, and we all have great opportunities, and we just have to make the most of them.
And you're going to bat a lot, and you have a pretty good track record. I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Mike Alfred. If someone handed you $1 million today, you get to keep it. Yay, you win the lottery. You get to allocate it how you'd like to 5 investments. Give me the percentages. What investments and what are the percentage allocations?
So I'd say 30% Bitcoin. I'd say going to be 10% other, Carvana coins, and then I think so that leaves me 60%. So, and the rest is going to be probably 50% of these kinds of like Opendoor opportunities, where these are stocks tied to different stories that are going to play out over like a 5-year period, but have a chance to kind of really revolutionize some little niche or sector or area. And then probably 10% would be a little bit of safer kind of slower growing, plodding like little stocks that have good stories. They're not going to 100x, but they are solid citizens, and I'm never going to be embarrassed kind of seeing them in the portfolio.
So besides Open, like, do you have any other specific ones that you're really targeting right now and you're eyeing and you think are good 100 bagger opportunities?
Yeah, so I've got about 8 in like the rising Dynasty portfolio, I call it. So IREN and Cipher,
Right.
we touched on those
Yep.
briefly. I think those are super high potential stocks. I think long term, everybody's like wringing their hands because IREN dropped from $75 to $40 or $48 or something. I think it's ultimately going to be a $900 stock. So like you can like cry about it. I always hear from people and they say, oh, I missed it because I didn't buy it at 9. Well, if it's a $48 stock that's on the route to being a $900 stock, you didn't miss it. I mean, so I like IREN, I like Cipher, I like HUT 8, which is also kind of in a similar story of playing on the AI data center, but also they have the Bitcoin mining angle because they own 65% of American Bitcoin. I also really like a company called Better Home and Finance,
Oh, yeah.
BETR, which is a mortgage originator using AI to kind of try to do what Rocket Mortgage does in a much cheaper, faster way through using AI instead of people to kind of push paper around and get people the lowest price mortgages that they can possibly get. And as we're sort of approaching this moment where rates are finally going to come down, they're perfectly positioned. And in the biotech space, there's a little company called Sana, which the ticker is SANA, and they are building a whole new platform using stem cells to try to come up with a sort of new, much more powerful and innovative way of solving different kinds of difficult diseases. And the first one that they focused on was type 1 diabetes. So that's what you're born with. And one of my 4 kids has type 1 diabetes.
Oh, wow.
He was diagnosed when he was 13. And so it's a huge kind of worldwide kind of market for it. There's a lot of sort of 100 years ago, if you got basically you stop being able to produce insulin in your body, it was like a death sentence. They came up with insulin, but now this company has a solution that basically one treatment and it retrains your body to create insulin itself. So they've successfully shown evidence that it works in a handful of humans, but in the next year or two they're going to have to go through the whole mix of proving it out on a wider scale basis. If they get across the finish line, I mean, they're a potential $100 billion company just from that one, solution to type 1 diabetes itself. So,
interesting.
I mean, so it doesn't always have to be, e-commerce company or a AI company, but you want to kind of look for stocks that you just think people are missing. They're walking by like a piece of trash just sort of blowing on the street, people thinking like it's worthless. And yet like within something, you find a jewel of a company that could be much bigger and more successful one day. And that's what you want to put your money behind.
But you have AI models that help you with this, right? Like, did you create those models, or is this something that the average person can access and like do their own homework to try to find one of these gems?
We created our own.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of people just go to ChatGPT and type in what's a good 100 bagger stock. I don't, it's going to
hallucinate
they're not that they're not that powerful yet that they can tell us like how to make perfect trades and the perfect stock. So we have a system where we're building all kinds of like machine learning models and taking different factors into account, and it could be like volume or profitability and insider buying, and we're ranking all these things on different scales and then running it through some sort of pipeline to give us some insights on which companies randomly out there, whether they're trading in the US or some like Pakistan stock exchange or something like might catch our interest. And sometimes it'll just be like somebody will mention a stock at a dinner conversation, and I'll think like, oh yeah, I haven't looked at that company in a while, but then you'll go back and you'll run it through the system. But so the average person can't create their own statistical models necessarily yet, although things are changing all the time, but you can just start to use the tools that you do have at your fingertips. And somebody was said to me yesterday, like, oh, how can I trust ChatGPT? Because sometimes they give me the wrong answer. And that's true. But like the really smart folks are somebody told me that all kids today should, major in prompting, in college, like how to write a prompt.
Right.
And then how to realize when the answer you get back from ChatGPT is maybe it's like 65% right, but there's probably like 35% like it is hallucinating on, and then you have to ask a few follow-up questions. I always get coached by my kids like, oh no, Dad, you got to get angry at ChatGPT if it says something like that, and tell them, no, you told me to, this and that doesn't make sense, and because then it learns and all this kind of stuff. So there's, the point is like be proactive, kind of use what you can, and that's the only way you'll get smarter and smarter about figuring out like what's useful and what's not useful.
Yeah, I hear people using ChatGPT for creating their securities and like all of these advanced applications. And I think I need to improve on prompting, because sometimes my ChatGPT definitely hallucinates. And I'm like, you cannot trust this thing. But that's so funny. You have gone viral for doing videos outside of Drake's house. Can you share what you're doing when you make those videos? And have you reached Drake? Has he talked to you?
Well, it started in the summer when I got long Opendoor, and I was like, tweeting about it nonstop at all hours of the day. And it was my 16-year-old son, Julian, my second born, who said, Dad, you keep saying like Opendoor is this amazing 100x opportunity, but you haven't. How can you really like communicate that more broadly? Because there are only so many people in the world that watch Bloomberg or Fox Business or CNBC. And I said, oh, that's a good point, Julian. What you have got any ideas? And he said, well, why don't you make a video in front of Drake's house? And I thought he meant like just a one-off kind of video. But he said, no, like if you want it to go viral, Dad, you got to do it every day until he does something. And I was like, until he does something? And he's like, yeah, like you should say, I'm going to be here every day, rain or shine, weekends too, and until he buys, some Opendoor stock, for example. And I thought, oh, okay. So, I mean, that's how it started. And so today, actually, before I came up here in the elevator, I recorded the day 88 video, which I had to do in New York City, unfortunately, not in front of Drake's house. So it's been 88 days in a row. And I thought that, it was going to be about winning Drake over. And I have made good contact with the guy who's the head of security at Drake's place in Toronto, this guy named Bitkey.
Has he bought Opendoor?
He bought Opendoor. Because
maybe he'll be richer than Drake soon.
And he bought better too. And he was like, he's a perfect guy, like that illustrates like, the people that are kind of following this whole rising dynasty, because he like the idea that he could make 100x from a stock. When I explained it to him, he was like, really? He's like, what if I put $10,000 into this thing? And I was like, well, Bitkey, like if I'm right and 100x's, like then you would be worth $1 million. He's like, he couldn't believe it. Like he was like blown away. Like the concept just hadn't entered his mind. And so he said like, well, the guy that you got to talk to is Future. And I was like, Future? Like that's a guy? And he's like, yeah, that's his Drake's business manager. We all call him Future. And he's like been part of the crew for the last 15 years and stuff. But he would want to hear more about this. So I'm trying to get in touch with Future. Some people from Opendoor on the board have actually been in touch with Future. There's talk about like a Super Bowl commercial and all this kind of stuff, with Drake and Opendoor. We'll have to see. If I gave Drake and Future some business advice, it'd be like get paid in stock, for what you do.
Okay.
Because this thing could 100x. So I haven't given up on that at all. And we'll keep, I don't know how many days I'm going to be out there. And people sometimes worry, like, what are you going to do in the winter, Eric? And I'm like, well, we have coats in Canada and stuff like that. But I have tried to broaden it more recently because you got to keep it fresh. And so we do some videos in the Drake's neighborhood because there are a lot of celebrities that are kind of nearby. And what I've found from people who've watched the videos is like, they say like, Eric, I started watching them because I was like, who is this like hedge fund guy like standing in front of Drake's house? Like it was so like off the wall. But then I sort of like, I just like that you're the kind of person that would do whatever it takes to kind of help this stock. And then all of a sudden I started noticing that I liked just getting these messages from you every day. And now it's like a part of my morning routine where I want to wake up and I want to see like what crazy thing like Eric, says in his little video at 7 a.m. in the morning. So it's more of like, emotional support.
Yeah.
Like sometimes there are bad weeks in the market and people are frustrated with an Opendoor dropped from $8 to $6 or something like, what does it mean? And so if I can try to help, offer some assurances during those periods of time, like that's what the video messages have sort of morphed into. And so whether or not Drake buys, I hope he does, because I think he'd make a lot of money. He does like to buy Bitcoin, I've heard, and sports betting.
I've heard that.
Yeah. So he lost something like $750,000 on the U.S. Open, betting that this guy Sinner would win the tennis in the U.S. Open. And so if I get my chance with Future, I'll be like, Future, just like take half of Drake's like sports betting budget and put it into 100-bagger stocks, and like you guys will be so much better off.
So if Drake called you on your cell phone, you had a minute to talk to him, what would you say?
I would say like, hey, Drake, you're the most successful artist in the world. This is what people don't realize about Drake. He's had 88 top 10 Billboard hits. You know how many the Beatles had? 30. Taylor Swift has only had 33. So he's not just a great rapper. He is like a great artist. I don't know I don't know what he's worth. Like, let's say he's worth $1 billion or something after, I think he's been a rapper for like 15 years. But like the power of compounding and investing, and like whether it's for my grandfather or it's for Drake, is like if he put in, for him, a small amount of his money into something like Opendoor and it did 100x, suddenly like in 2 or 3 years, he's worth 4 billion instead of 1 billion. And so like, I don't care like how many tours he goes on in Europe, how much merch he sells, how many OVO shirts he sells. Like that's the power of investing. And so part of the whole Drake thing has also been, it's not about celebrity worship. It's about showing everybody, whether they're in Germany, whether they're in Alaska. We got like Alaskan fishermen, like watching these videos, investing in stocks for the first time, sometimes on these like 10-week trips out in the Bering Sea on using Starlink, trading stocks and stocks like Opendoor, because they want to take the 60,000 that they've earned in the last few months fishing to double it, triple it, or something like that. So it's like this power of compounding, whether it's in Bitcoin, like the important thing is like, we have to get more people into the pool. We have to get more people excited and to see the potential of what they can make if they just start small, but start doing it religiously.
So you'd say, hey, Drake, buy Open.
Yeah, there are like amazing album covers with me, like in place of Drake, giving advice, like he has one album cover where he's like got all these like cartoon like baby mamas or something, and somebody put in Eric Jackson like holding like Drake's bags of money, like protecting Drake's bags and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, Drake, I mean, it's a sure thing. And nothing would win the Kendrick war more than being able to say, hey, I put some of my money in Open, and now I'm the first guy who is conclusively like bigger than anybody else in terms of my billions that I got from investing. That's the other thing all these guys like. They like to be, did you ever notice like one of them starts a clothing line and then all these other artists start copying the clothing line? So, Kevin Durant got into venture investing because he played for the Golden State Warriors. All of a sudden, like every athlete had to make investments in VC funds. Mm-hmm. Where is the athlete that's going to be the first one to be this like ultra billionaire because they got behind 100x stock or crypto or Bitcoin?
I'm waiting for Taylor Swift to be a big Bitcoiner. Maybe write a song about it. It has been such a pleasure, Eric. What's cool too is a lot of people look at folks like hedge fund managers and the suits, and they're not really that relatable, or they think they're not. And you're one of us. So I love that. I know you have a huge following. People are going to be so excited to hear from you. Thanks so much for joining me. Any final thoughts?
Hey, thanks for giving me the opportunity to kind of spread the word about Drake and the power of investing and the power of Bitcoin. I'm super excited. The Open Army is with you, Natalie, and I think they're going to be big believers in they are big believers in Bitcoin. They love kind of the message that you espouse, and so good luck with the launch of your new book too. I know that's going to do great things.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for checking out this episode of Coin Stories. Make sure you're subscribed to the show so you don't miss any new episodes. And if you can, turn on those notifications and leave us a positive review. They really help the show grow organically with new listeners. We have a free weekly newsletter. You can sign up at thenewsblock.substack.com. This show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing should constitute as official investment advice, and you should always do your own research. I'm always open to feedback and guest suggestions, so please feel free to reach out at info@talkingbitcoin.com. I'll see you next time.